You have to
Right.
try things, and you can try things at a very low level, low risk level. You can
Mhm.
talk to people who do the job or the business that you are interested in. You can go get an entry level job in the industry that you're interested in.
What's the smallest item you could use to try out that skill set and see if you like it? Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Tom School of Life Weekly Podcast. I'm your community director, Kevin Dolan, joined here by our facilitators, Barbara Williams, David Moore, and Jeremy Evans. Today, we want to talk about doing what you love and the money will follow, which is something that you hear said a lot. And a lot of times you hear it said by entrepreneurial influencers, people whose job it is, the way they make money is to tell you how to make money. Which is a challenging proposition. So I want to get your takes on to what extent is that true, under what conditions is it true, and maybe how can we use that in our own entrepreneurial journeys. So do what you love and the money will follow. Let's start with you, Jeremy. What's your take on that?
So I love self-help. I single-handedly support the entire self-help industry. So you guys are welcome. But I lived that to, or rather with more commitment than most at a very young age. And of course, I think it depends when you start counting businesses, right? So once you get started, you can fail fast enough that maybe we don't even count that one. But my first real business that took a substantial amount of investment of time and money fell completely flat because I was utterly unprepared. And I also didn't know what I loved. I loved the ideal that I was propagating. Now, this is, of course, I'm not even going to say the name because I'm so embarrassed. But this is, of course, a kombucha business before kombucha was cool, before you knew about it, 12 years ago, 13 years ago now, I think. And I was going to freeze dry it, turn it into a powder, and then reconstitute and get all the amazing benefits. Now, at the time, I'm thinking, I'm going to be shipping this to Africa, and they're going to make potable water out of dirt, and I'm going to save the world. Everyone's going to love this. I'm going to be rich. I wrote an incredible, 20-page company document. I started recruiting people on charisma alone, which is something I've never done since. I felt so guilty about that after the fact. Recruiting people without pay, et cetera, et cetera. And then, I went wonderfully into debt. It turns out I had no idea how to bring my product to market. I did work in laboratory, so I built my own freeze dryer. That was actually a lot of fun. Mixed my own chemicals. I did preserve the cultures. I cultured them on dishes. So I had a biological background that you guys don't really hear about. But there were a lot of tears shed. Walking that path. And it's because I did zero analysis. I did zero financial analysis. I did zero market analysis. I did not understand all the components that you take on as an entrepreneur. You don't just do operations. And by the way, if you're not actively doing those operations in your day-to-day life, you don't even know if you love the operations. You might not. I loved heat sealing those Mylar bags. I didn't like making the kombucha. I thought I did. I did not. And you also are doing marketing, sales, legal, accounting. It's a lot. If you have other people, you have leadership and management. I'm more or less quoting E-Myth here. I think he divides into 7 areas of business that you don't realize that you're signing up for. It takes a delicate balance between the creative, idealistic part of oneself and the rational, deductive part to analyze what can be successful and how much effort is required. I can't emphasize that enough. That being said, if you do not have an affinity for what you plan to do, or if you feel that what you plan to do is not morally righteous, which is something that occasionally happens, or that you're not actually contributing value, you're going to have a very hard time waking up in the morning. You do need to be able to match your affinities. You will not cover all 7 areas of business, or however many areas you want to break it down into. You will not. So you need to know your weaknesses. And the only way to know that is to actually accomplish multiple sales cycles. You need to go to market as quickly as possible.
Yeah. Well, I think you touched on what you opened with is you didn't know what you loved at that point. So I think a lot of people who are just starting out, they might be 30, 40, 50 years old, and they still don't know what they want to be when they grow up. You have to
Right.
try things, and you can try things at a very low level, low risk level. You can talk to people who do the job or the business that you are interested in. You can go get an entry level job in the industry that you're interested in. I did that. I thought I wanted to be a lawyer. So I went and worked at a law firm and quickly realized that was not the life for me. But that was a very low risk thing. And it was great job experience that I learned from anyway and moved on and took with me. But I think if you can identify the things you love, and then also the things you're good at, and then bonus points if you can find a mission behind that, a group of people you want to serve, a problem that you have a solution for. If you can find that like combination of things, that's where, if you do what you love, the money will follow. But I think that's like the main thing you have to go for. You have to go for all three. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I think people often, when they think about doing what they love, they sort of imagine that they have one thing that they love.
Right.
And maybe for some people that's true. Like, it's possible that your desire is so delicate that like you must do that one thing. And I don't know exactly what to say to people like that, except that most people that I've known have lots of things that they love. And I invite people. So I do a little bit of personal coaching, and a couple of the things that I've stumbled on is, what would you do if you had $500 million? Because that erases the question of, number one, it erases the question of how you're going to pay your bills. It also erases the question of like, well, if I were a radiologist, I could have a sports car, or I could go on vacation or whatever. It's like, forget about all that. You like that problem solved. Why are you here on this earth? And that can, I mean, it seems like a simple question, but that can lead people in really powerful directions. When I asked myself that question, when I was working at my crappy cubicle job, what I wanted was to get, a dozen of my friends onto a cul-de-sac somewhere and have a neighborhood and run our own businesses and have our own community and have our own thing. Which, we're like 3/4 of the way there with what I'm doing right now. And so like, I get to do exactly what I would do if I was, richer than anybody. Which, I mean, it's an unbelievably powerful thing. But of course, I am one of the guys who did that by telling other people how to be entrepreneurs. So like, it's a very challenging pitch to make. But I will say, like, we know people in the Tom Woods group, in some other groups we're part of, that they really do. They do what they love, which is why they work 16 hours a day, because you just can't turn off that excitement, that enthusiasm, which is what makes them successful, right? That's how the money follows.
Right.
David, I want to hear you weigh in on this.
Yeah. So the question, do what you love and the money will follow. I would say do a lot of things and find out what you love. There's also a lot of things worth doing that are no way to make a living. So there's so many things that you can get into that just you'll never make money at, but you should still do them. And I think probably the engineer's question is, or the engineer's answer to that question would be, probably depends on what you love, right? Because if you love something that makes money, then yeah, you should do it. But I think I love things that work. I love things that produce a return. So I would say do things that produce a return, and then find what aspect of that thing you enjoy most, and then try to create more of that aspect to grow that larger, and then see if you can still continue to get a return with that particular zone of activity. For example, if you enjoy sales, find out what about sales you enjoy the most. Do you enjoy the actual transaction? Do you enjoy the hunt? Do you enjoy the conversation with the client? Maybe if it's in my case, it was the conversation with the client and the conversation with the sales reps after the sales call, right? So that lend itself to coaching and communication and instruction. So trying to just reverse engineer where the joy came from in the process of making a return, I think is a great way to expand what you love about what you do. But yeah, running experiments, all of what's been said is really valuable. And I saw a quote, I saw a tweet the other day by Cernovich I really enjoyed. It said, "The mind is designed to solve problems. That's why when you're not seeking anything great, you create BS, fake problems. That's why it's always better to take on big issues. You're going to stress anyway. May as well work on something meaningful." So I think it's important. Your brain is going to crank. Your brain is going to move, right? And so give it something that it really finds it's used to be effective at. So yeah.
There's so many people. I know so many people who actually feel stupid at their jobs because they are just so bored. They're just so desperately bored by what they're like. And I've had this experience. I'll be sitting in a meeting and I'll be really trying to like take notes and pay attention. And it's just like I have no idea what they're talking about. And I have no interest in what they're talking, like no desire to know what they're talking about. And
who are you talking about, Kevin? Who are you talking about? Which meetings?
I'm talking about the military industrial complex.
Okay. Geez,
Not us, Jeremy.
I've noticed those eyes glaze over a couple times. I assumed we were fantasizing about riches or something.
Would you guys believe that Jeremy's first love is kombucha? I was shocked. I was shocked to hear that.
Green screen is cutting out half of this. This shouldn't surprise you at all, and I'm in Boulder for a reason.
Oh man, I did when I've actually had people tell me like I'm hopeless. There's no way that I'm going to be able to do what I like, and it's like, well, why? And they're like, well, because what I like is I like to play video games. and I'll be like, you're right. You're not going to get paid to play video games, but
some people do.
Some people do.
Okay,
which is amazing. Right. Yeah,
and that I think is like the whole pivot of this conversation. Like, do you count on being LeBron? Do you count on being the 100th of a percent that gets to do the exact, like, to entertain other people, right? Probably not. But what I ask a guy, and like a lot of these guys go, well, I like video games, therefore I should be a video game designer. And I'm like, no, probably not. Probably not. Playing video games is a very different experience than creating a video game. But I asked them, like, what kinds of video games do you like? Because those are different experiences, and the things that you're getting out of it are different. And like, why? I joke with people that like the one thing that I got from my $115,000 MBA was it made me better at StarCraft, because there was a project management component where you learn about bottlenecks and resource management, and it turns out that's really relevant to StarCraft. So, and nothing else about any of my other professional aspirations, but I ranked silver, so that's exciting.
StarCraft is the only video game that I played in the past like 15 years or something. Legitimately, I love it. I love the fact that there's a world league and then there's a Korean league, right? It's so, you have to be so nimble. Your neuron conduction velocity has to be so fast. Reaction times have to be lightning fast at the point that you do 500 actions a minute. Now I'm merely a spectator. I haven't played it in forever because I suck at it. But I love the idea of these people just being completely wired in to the matrix, using nothing but their brain. It's some kind of sick sci-fi fetish, but
right. And those are guys that skill set is not so specialized that you couldn't apply it to making money. You're just not going to make money playing StarCraft probably. And so like, yeah, you do. I had a guy who came in, sales guy, just the other day, and he mentions enjoying sales, but he's had two different kinds of sales jobs, and he really liked one and didn't so much like the other. And one of them was short conversation. I can make this situation better for you. Bada bing, I make some money. I close 3 or 4 a day, right?
Mm-hmm.
And those are like small business clients. And then the enterprise client is like, okay, every little tweak of this deal is like the difference between, it's like a $50,000 difference, right? And so they're all worth talking about, which means You do have to have a head for details, and you have to be able to sit through the kind of meeting that I can't sit through and hammer out all those details. But you do build a deeper relationship with the client. You spend a lot more time, you get to know them better. And he was like, that's for me. That's what I need. And so it's not just like, are you a people person? Do you like sales? It's like, you can get into the nitty gritty. And in order to do that, you do have to have this orientation of failing fast, because you have to explore that possibility space, like Barbara was saying.
I think it's so important to reject the very oversimplified, almost tragically utilized phrases like, are you a people person? I mean, my gosh, talk about taking a stone to a surgery, like not even a knife, like just blunt instruments of those kind of questions, right? I think it's so important to have a more refined conversation around what is it about the thing you do you enjoy, right? And I think people will use broad terms like sales without asking what type of sales role. You touched on a pain point for me, Kevin, because I've talked to people and they're like, well, I love people. And it's like, we're going to have to go a little deeper than that. We're going to have to have to get some more data than that. We're going to have to really understand specifically what types of conversations, when are you in the zone? When are you really finding the desire to do more of it? When are you asking for an additional conversation? Or when are you tapping out? And I guess a lot of the kind of run-of-the-mill conversations around career advisement is almost just as harmful as not having the conversation at all, right? I think it's okay to linger and to obsess a little bit about going deeper into the question.
That can be an extended coaching engagement, answering that question with somebody who's good at it. And it can still take a long time to get to the answer. I mean, like, I think, okay, Jeremy, come on.
I'm exploding. I'm sorry. I've got notes. I'm freaking out. I don't know how much a coach can do for you in that capacity. I really don't. I think that a coach can help. They can facilitate. I think whenever you're dealing with pragmatic knowledge, instruction can be extremely valuable. I have a great business coach who points out the obvious, and it's like, right, we're doing profit and loss tonight. I have a lot to learn about profit and loss. I'm looking forward to attending this webinar. But there are two aspects here. There's self-knowledge, a kind of introspection, knowing oneself. So one's affinities, their strengths, their weaknesses, et cetera. And I don't think anyone can do that for you. I'm a big fan of self-help and maps, not the territory, but the maps. I'm not going to explain my analogy. I hope you've heard it before. But there are many maps. The more maps that you have, maybe the more that you can lay them over your own head and figure out exactly where you are and who you are. But that's a very hard thing for somebody else to do for you.
Yes.
I would argue the coach isn't. Sorry, Jeremy. I would argue that the coach isn't going to do it for you, but the way David said it, like they're asking the right questions. They're digging deeper. Mm-hmm. They're going to keep pushing you. We're not staying at sales. We're not staying at people. I'm a people person. Why? What exactly about that interaction brought you joy? So if you have someone coaching you through that process of investigating that will bring your level of self-awareness up higher. And that, I think, is the key to all of this. You do need a very high level of self-awareness. You need to know a lot about what you love, and you really need to know, honestly, what are you actually good at? And you can ask people in your life if you don't know, or get a coach, or there's a lot of places you can get that externally. That part you actually might do better getting externally, like to have other people tell you what you're good at.
I think the second part, just briefly to elaborate, I think you need internal knowledge, and then there's a kind of perspicaciousness. So that's a $15 word for looking around you. There's a peripatetic aspect. So that's another $15 word for Aristotle, walking around and talking about his philosophy as he walks and experiences the world. And we know Plato was for the next world, the world of forms, the world of ideals, that there's something else outside of ourselves that we can access mystically. I'm not opposed to the mystic. I have a very hard picking sides here. I think that there's self-knowledge to be gained from that mystic experience, but you need the Aristotelian experience to be able to see your environment and be able to move and pivot. That's what the entrepreneur can do that the enterprise cannot. one of the things you mentioned is this big sales contract with the enterprise business. Every little tweak is $50,000. Well, it's a $50 million contract. The real problem is every little tweak is another 2 months of correspondence for a 6-year sales cycle. Those kinds of businesses don't have the flexibility and mobility. You can be the mouse in the age of the dinosaurs, and we don't have to wait for ashes to carve out a decent burrow and a good living. If you have that ability to see what's around you and to move the capability. Anyway, I'm sorry for getting.
No, this is good.
I'm getting fired up. That dinosaur metaphor, I think, pretty apt. I'm not sure how many times I've done that one.
Aristotelian, we were up to $45.
I'm going to cash out by the end of this. Yeah.
I felt like I was like, with the dinosaur metaphor, I felt like I was like hooking onto a plane and I just got launched into this dinosaur metaphor. It was crazy. David, did you have a thought? Were you going somewhere?
I think we're passionate about this topic because we've all come at it from different angles. And something that I will add is I find it valuable to pay attention to what I have done versus what I say I'll do. And so one of the things I love to do is I love to look back at my old iPhone photos. I love to look back at old calendar appointments and see which ones I kept, see which ones I canceled, see which ones I enjoyed, see which days were great, and try to just reverse engineer when was I loving it, and then do more of that, because I like to explore and try a lot of different things. And sometimes in the midst of that exploration, I'll be out there going, this isn't it. I don't know what this is, but this isn't it. And then I've got to kind of go back to the drawing board and go, all right, well, what was it last month that was really firing and was really great? Or what was I doing this time last year that was really promising and has turned into something? And then I can kind of pay attention to the soil that I'm in, right? If I'm noticing that a certain thing around me is growing and actually taking root, then I can go, all right, it's like I'm been thrown into a unique universe and I have to learn the soil around me. And I only learn that by looking around at the crops that have taken root and grown over the past few months. And so just investigating a little bit of retrospectively into your calendar, into your photos, into your life.
Yeah. I try to think when I'm talking to guys about like where they want to head, I try to find the minimum viable proof. What's the cheapest way we could prove out that hypothesis? So, classic example, guy wants to be a mechanic. And it's like, well, obviously being a mechanic at a shop is not a huge, you can get qualified for that fairly quickly and just go do it. But he's thinking like, I want to own a shop, which is this huge capital intensive thing. And a long road of jobs with an uncertain trajectory to get there. What I recommended to that guy was, what if you do a little fix and flip? What if you go buy some engines or even like an old car and try to fix it up and make that, like, what's the smallest item you could use to try out that skill set and see if you like it? Because a lot of what you're going to learn if you're like fixing and flipping on Craigslist or something is you're going to learn how you feel about meeting strangers and selling them things and dealing with like potentially like liability and accusations and like, you didn't fix the thing, like you sold me a lemon, like a lot of the things that you guys were talking about, Jeremy, with like all the element of marketing, like how's my copy on my Craigslist posting, which is not something that you think about when you're like, I'd like to turn wrenches for a living, And so it's like, do you really want to be an entrepreneur and take on the whole thing? Or do you want a job in this industry, that's totally fine, but like, it's something you should know about yourself.
It hits me as we're talking that we're really dealing with people that have a large enough data set of experiences. And so I think this is a different conversation for young people, depending on how much life you've lived or how much you've tried, how much variety you've tried in your life.
Yeah.
If you have not experienced a lot of variety, that may be the stage that you're at, is that you just simply have to go have a series of internships that you put yourself through. I've had a lot of those internships. And so I'm able to I have this, and a lot of, I think, people in the School of Life have, lived enough life to where they can kind of look back and see what works and what doesn't. But if you may be at that stage where you have to just go run a lot of experiments. And certainly that would be the advice I'd give anybody, the younger members of our group, is that they still need to accumulate a lot of data.
It's funny because we're in this world where education credentials are so inflated. They're so expensive. And people we're just, like I said, my ridiculous decision to get an MBA. Unreal how stupid like these expenses are. But at the same time, I find that people will be unwilling to put up like $50 to learn something. And it's like, and I wonder if that's just because like one of those things is like socially expected. And so like, I won't feel stupid if it sucks. Like if it goes wrong, then, well, it goes wrong the same way it went for everybody else and I'm not special. But like if I try something in the amount of $2,000 or $500 or whatever it is, and it bombs, then I'm silly because I went and tried to be this, mad scientist, and it blew up in my face. I tried to sell kombucha. Like, come on.
Oh, come on. Come on. Which, by the way, you all know what kombucha is, and you didn't 12, 13 years ago.
Yeah.
That was you, Jeremy.
I would have killed it if I had any capability. And that's, I actually want to address something a little bit different. Developing capability and grit and persistence and competencies, perhaps in a diverse area, perhaps deep competency, et cetera. I think these are all really critical things that you gain from external world experience. I think that underneath, this is something that's often talked about in the startup world. People get married to an idea. They fall in love with an idea. We talked about this more in the beginning, but I have to own a mechanic shop. There's nothing else. I put the blinders on 6 months ago without telling my wife. And now the only thing in my life is owning a mechanic shop. And I will just destroy myself in the process of doing this. Maybe sometimes having that level of persistence and tenacity is valuable. Obviously, we know that can be a course for self-destruction. Beneath the I must own a mechanic shop is a meta principle. There is a deeper component of self-knowledge that person lacks, presumably. Maybe not. I'm not talking about the actual person. I don't know the actual person. But if you can achieve that level of self-knowledge, you can spare yourself 5 years of disaster. And I don't think that it's extremely important to get out into the real world and develop competencies and understanding of how things actually work. I delight in that. I'm euphoric to uncover a new industry that has bizarre regulations and standard industry processes and habits. And it's a complete delight to me. That said, one cannot be addicted just to the outside. Until you know yourself, you will forever be trudging down the latest shiny thing, the next moving object. And this is very, very dangerous. And self-knowledge is perhaps the most scarce resource in our modern culture. There are a lot of ways to get there. I'm not sure about external tools. I'm not sure about other people. I think that the culpability at the very least falls on yourself. And you need to know, why did I start this kombucha business? Right. And you can go completely broke and spend 4 years of your life to get to that point where you start to think, why did I start the kombucha business? The reality is, if you can assess that, you can learn about yourself and carry it forward. Some people have catastrophic mistakes that they blame externally. I go through, similar to David, not really my calendar, but I go through old records and things like this. I hate nostalgia. I look back and I think of all the people that I've ever hurt or let down. I think of all the times that I have failed personally, and I will call those people up, or I will say a little prayer. Sometimes they're gone, and apologize for how frail and stupid I am. And that, for me, that's necessary because I have an inflated sense of self, right? I occasionally mention this. I don't think this applies to everybody, but to me, that gets to the core of who I am past my own bluster, because the most dangerous thing with a touch of charisma, a touch of self-help, whatever, is you can fool yourself. And you are the greatest fool if you have fooled yourself. The question is, Why did I start the kombucha business? Why did I spend $60,000 4 years of my life? Why did I embarrass myself in front of my in-laws? Everyone else that I could have impressed. It's debatable whether or not I thought of my parents at all during that period, because sometimes you have to just put the blinders on, right? And the answer was really just sovereignty. Sovereignty is, I think, an answer behind a lot of the people that we encounter. I'm thinking a little bit more exit here. Forgive me. But generally, people want a sense of ownership and self in our group here. For different people, it's different things. Sovereignty is a meta principle. There are about 1 million ways that you can achieve more sovereignty and self-reliance or independence in your life. There are a million different ways to get away from that nagging middle manager who has been making your life hell and making you feel belittled and emasculated. We'll leave it at that for the past 5-10 years. That is not starting the mechanic business. That's a personal problem. There are ways to act that in the physical world, but let's come back to ourselves, to our core.
I've often encountered people who will they will come to me a little bit guilty because they went and took a job that was better for them. Because what I'm supposed to tell them to do is go start a business tomorrow.
Right.
And so you took a job, but I'm always like, no, like, does that lead you in the direction you want to go? Great. Like, if what you want, like I have this conversation on the regular, like, do you actually want to run a business, or do you want to just not hate your boss? Because like, there's lots of cool bosses. There really are. And lots of cool companies to work for. In my opinion, they tend to be smaller because they're not sort of consumed by the sort of top down, fungus that's eating everything. But there's lots of those companies, lots of cool people who could use your skill set. And if that's where you fit, great, like do that. But I think it's so important to fail fast and often. And I think one of the things that being an entrepreneur has opened up for me, and this is sort of how I try to escape, at least in my own mind, the accusation that like all I do is tell other people what to do. The professional advice giver. The way that I try to get around that in my head is I'm out trying to start like literally like 9 other hustles right now. And at a very low stakes, low impact level, just seeing like, do I want to write this book? Do I want to support this shrimp farm? Do I want to where's my interest? And I had a guy come on the podcast, actually, my podcast, who he's an ENFP like me, which is this very like novelty seeking, visionary kind of person. And I asked him how he disciplines his schedule and manages his energy, because we're always like letting things fall off, letting plates stop spinning and crash. And his answer, which I've taken extremely to heart, is let it crash. Like the plates that matter.
I'm already there. We've solved that problem. For context, when we've all typed out, 3 out of 4 of us are ENFPs.
Right.
Guess which one of us really gets stuff done? Now, to be fair, I'm very industrious, and I'm also competent. I get stuff done. Do I get everything done? Barbara gets everything done.
And I'm an ENFJ. I was corrected. I met with Scott.
Nice.
Yeah. So nice. I'm an ENFJ, not an INFJ, but I'm learning more about that. But yes, I'm the one that's odd out here.
Yeah. And basically he was like, you need to learn. You need to learn who you are and what you care about, because we tend to be, our type of guy tends to be like, what does everybody want? Let's just do what everybody like. Let's just find options for everybody, find options for other people. And it's harder to go in and be like, what do I desire personally?
Jim Rohn lectured once on time management, and he started the speech with all these, one approach to time management is to completely ignore the subject. And he was dead serious about that. And he said, because don't be overly bothered by what somebody is telling you you have to do to be productive, or what somebody is telling you you have to do to be an entrepreneur. One way to be an entrepreneur is when you're walking down the street is to turn right because you decided to turn right, and because you're just owning your day, you're just owning your time, and you're letting things fall that are no longer important to you, right? Or not as important as the other things in your life. And to me, that's an entrepreneurial act, is to make those decisions each day about what gets to move forward and what gets left behind. And I think putting too tight of parameters on what is kind of the way to be entrepreneurial, you can already, if you're a true entrepreneur, anytime somebody tells you how to be entrepreneurial, you are already thinking of exceptions. And that's good. Warm that flame.
Yeah, I genuinely, the one thing that I genuinely miss about my W-2 life is clocking out. And it's screwed up. It's screwed up because what I want is like daddy or teacher or somebody to like give me permission. And it's like, you are in charge, like you decide. And I'm really like, what is, I think if it was just me, I would never decide. What it is for me is my kids. They interrupt me and I have to tell them yes or no. And like, what are you doing? Well, it's something that I have to do. I have to, I don't have to do it. I don't have to do it. I choose to do it instead of the time I could spend with them. And so all of that stuff, it matters so much more. And of course, the same was true when I had the W-2 and I was actually gone all day.
You didn't think about it at all.
Didn't think about it at all. I was gone all day and I was accomplishing nothing. I was doing nothing that was benefiting anybody, least of all my kids. But it was safe. It was, I had been told from the top that like, that's what you do.
I have a lot, if I may.
Yeah, please.
One, I have a lot of, it's a mixed blessing. I have misgivings about creating that cocoon for other people. It is a huge part of the value that you offer as an employer. For some, I think it's a disservice, right? But that's an interesting question, right? Should anyone live in the cocoon where daddy is making decisions for you and you just don't think about it because this is what we do? And welcome to Prussian educated, industrialized society, et cetera, et cetera. In regards of dropping plates, I occasionally drop plates that I committed to juggle. That is a little bit different than saying, I can't do this. No. If that is your problem, I want to say I am less than half of a person without my wife, right? I have some people that I work with. I am less than a quarter of a person without them. The parts do not sum to the whole when things successfully complement. Somebody like me needs somebody like Barbara, but Barbara's too fancy and I couldn't get her on payroll. But I need to outsource
here for you, Jeremy.
my weak parts of myself, right? And that's important to recognize. Again, that comes from self-knowledge. If you commit embarrassing mistakes, you can look the other way for your entire life, right? You can look the other way. And that is a deadly, deadly error. And you reap the consequences of that continually again and again. Regarding David's point about executive decision-making, that is exactly the most important muscle of the entrepreneur, of the business owner, particularly the business owner. You have to constantly make judgments. And I forget which of the myriad business or self-help books it was, but they said the strongest characteristic of the successful CEO is being able to make rapid, important decisions and then stick to it. Now, stick to it is debatable. How long should I stick to a bad decision, right? But the ability to make rapid decisions, if 5, 10 people are looking to you for guidance and instruction, if you will lose $1,000 that day in payroll, depending on whatever you say or whatever you don't say, you make the decision. You have to make the decision, no matter how arbitrary, and then owning that. Owning is sometimes harder than the decision itself. And then when you come back and you process, I made a decision and it was the bad one. Then you say, well, I'm done making decisions. I'm going to ask Papa. And Papa can be government. It can be an employer. It can be a lot of things. It can be a philosophy. It can be an ideology. It is the process of becoming oneself, which is an ancient and well-known process. And that's why I really want to emphasize it hangs right on the boundary between the external and the internal world. It's neither one completely. Yes, try a lot of things. A lot of the people listening are working full-time jobs with 3 kids. How many things can I try? You can try some. If you have accumulated wisdom, you've probably accumulated knowledge. If you can transmute that into wisdom, it makes all the difference in the world. I think that is, it's a very hard thing to talk about. It sounds like woo. I pulled the hair out, right? But to me, that's made all the difference.
Do you know what I tell those people? If somebody is, they've got their income taken care of, and they're desperately unhappy in their job. And I view this as like calling a bluff a little bit, because what I'll say is, what would it take for you to build a runway? What would it take for you to build an economic situation for yourself such that you could take 6 months to a year to prove out a couple of concepts, try a couple of things on? And I liken it to being in prison, and you've dug the hole that you can squeeze out of. You can't quite squeeze out of it yet. There's rebar on either side. You can't dig anymore this way. So it's like, how lean could you get to squeeze through that hole? And on the other side, you don't have to stay skinny forever. This is not a lifestyle diet. This is just crash. How lean could you get for how long to get out? And what you find.
Really, Barb? You were already so skinny.
Oh, stop.
And she's also famously tiny, just absolutely like a miniature, pretty much. I want to add, on the other side of the rebar, on the other side of the hole, you don't know what's there.
Right.
It's different than where you are. That's the only guarantee. It's not in that prison cell. Is it to the next one? Is it outside? Is it into a barbed wire fence? Right? That's audacity. That's boldness.
And that conversation leads to, do you really want to move, or do you want to complain? Like sometimes you don't really want to move. You just need to vent and hate where you're at, but you don't hate it that bad. And that's okay too. Like it's not everybody is in this desperate, horrible situation. Sometimes you just kind of, work sucks. But if you are like ready to chew your arm off to get out, there are ways you can do it. There's always ways you can do it. And if that means trying things in your off hours and your weekends, you can do it that way. Sometimes it does mean you got to build the space in which to do that, which means usually just saving money. I think we're a little over time. We're going to wrap it there. This was a great conversation, guys. Thanks for being here, and we'll see you next week. I'm thinking I'm going to be shipping this to Africa, and they're going to make potable water out of dirt